Thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining me for another episode on the Travel Collective, where I have these incredible conversations. I'm blessed to meet a lot of amazing and interesting individuals that I hope to someday meet in person. But today I'm talking to Lucia from London, which to me, London is just such a fascinating city. There's so much to explore there. I love going any time of year, and I've only been there 2 times, but Lucia lives in London. So welcome, Lucia.
Hello.
So, London, you said, tell us about London. You've lived there all your life, and what
Yeah,
fascinates you about the city? I mean, there's so many layers to it, in my opinion.
yes, there is. There are layers. I mean, there's layers of history, if nothing else, you know. Um, there it is a huge city. It's an old city, and there is so much to see and do. I think whatever you are interested in, you will probably find something in London that will interest you.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think for writers, there's a wealth of inspiration because I know you also write as well.
I do, yes, yes. I've been a writer for quite a few years now.
And
Mm.
how many books have you actually written? Because I know you showed me like a stack.
Hmm. Okay. Well, let me see. These are some of. I think I've contributed to a few more than ones I've actually written. But yeah, I co-wrote that about 30 years ago the London guidebook for Call of Cthulhu, the role-playing game, horror role-playing game. So one. Then we've got Pagan Portal Scrying two. My novel, that's one that's most recently came out. Erosion, that's three. Uh, Candle Magic, four. Guided Visualizations, five. Rounding the Wheel of the Year, six. Oh, and this is a community book I edited, Everyday Magic, so that's seven.
Oh,
Now we're missing one here.
yeah, I think so.
We're missing Poppets and Magical Dolls. That's not here.
Oh,
So yeah,
okay.
that's what I've written.
So when did you start writing? Were you always intrigued, were you always as a child writing and just intrigued with creating scenes and characters or
Yes, and I went to university. I did drama and comparative literary studies at for my BA. I went on and did an MA in Literary London, actually. So yeah, so I always wanted to be a writer. I actually worked on my local newspaper as
Mm.
a feature writer for quite a number of years. But I've also written books as well as that, and that's um, writing books and also teaching workshops on the topics of my books are what I do for a living now.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. So I know there's a little bit of like good witch, bad witch. I think your blog is named like Bad Witch, which, a lot of people can take that however they want. But I think London is one of these cities where if you are at all in tune with maybe that extra sense, as I call it, or whatever, it just, the streets kind of have all of that. When did you feel kind of that your own kind of, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, actually, my family were kind of a bit weird. My grandma was an astrologer, um,
Oh.
and she actually worked for Alan Leo, who was quite a famous astrologer back in the day. And my dad was really into dowsing. And in fact, my whole family were into weird things. When I was at school, the kids used to tease me and say my family were the Adams family,
Oh,
which I hated at the time.
well,
Of course, I
yeah,
hated it. You,
exactly.
you
Yeah.
don't want weird, you don't
No.
want to be weird when you're at school. But yeah, I mean, now I think it's great. But yeah,
Right.
I've always been interested in weird things, and then I met up with pagans and Wiccans and witches, and trained as a Wiccan, and then quite luckily started doing some freelance editing work for a mind body spirit publishing company, and then started writing books for them. So that's how I got to write the books.
Oh, that's fascinating. I know, but there's that show Outlander, which I know takes place mostly in Scotland, but it kind of ties into that whole like the stone circles, and all of the different things that you probably already have written about a little bit, or, just I think a lot of it is just being more in tune to ourselves and nature and what's around us.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, Wicca and similar modern pagan spiritual paths are nature based. So yeah, absolutely. We celebrate the cycles of nature. And yeah, absolutely. It's being in touch with nature and being in touch. And yes, learning about yourself. There's a lot of personal development to kind of learn more about yourself and be, try to be true to yourself.
I think that's fascinating. So, which books do you feel like just kind of flow out of you? Are they on that topic? Do you find novels a little bit more challenging, since you just said you wrote a novel recently?
At the moment, I'm really enjoying writing novels. That's where my heart is at the moment. And I'm currently writing another novel, a ghost story set at Christmas. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, there's certain places in London that you feel more inspired? Because I think there's a lot of hidden, kind of interesting places to London, but there's so many to mention. But is there
Hmm.
one in particular that, you feel in tune with?
Okay, well, I live in South London, very near Crystal Palace Park. And Crystal Palace Park has Victorian dinosaurs, giant ones. I mean, like life-size
Oh my gosh.
Victorian dinosaurs, made of, not real ones, obviously, made of kind of concrete and stone and stuff like that.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, if you Google it, like Crystal Palace Park dinosaurs, they're just brilliant. Um, and I think that's a really inspiring area. The Crystal Palace is called that because the Crystal Palace from the Great Exhibition, the Victorian exhibition that was in Hyde Park, was moved to
oh,
a hill in southeast London that got named Crystal Palace because that it was there, and it was there until the 1930s when it sadly burnt down.
oh.
But there are still kind of remains of it there. So there's like statues that were there that you can still see. There are terraces with sphinxes on them. And
Oh,
in fact,
wow.
at midsummer solstice, quite a lot of local people will climb up Crystal Palace Hill. I mean, it's not a very steep hill, but they'll go to the top of Crystal Palace Hill to watch the sunrise from the terraces where there are these sphinxes on either side, stone sphinxes.
Wow, that sounds fascinating, actually, and just so different and unique. I mean, that's what I love about London. There's just, like you said, there's so many layers. I think it was a walking tour, and they said how, London literally was running out of space, so they had to like move the graveyards. I mean, there's a lot of shifting of things, and so it just kind of feels like one of those places where any building you start to dig down, there might be remains.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do find them. I mean, um, there's an ancient Roman Mithraeum, a temple to the god Mithras, which is underneath the Bloomberg building. So when they were building the Bloomberg building, they also excavated so that people can go for free. You have to book a
Right.
ticket for free. You can go down, and they've actually got in the walls as you go down the different layers of like, oh, this layer would be such and such a time in history, this layer would be such and such a time in history, and artifacts that they found. And so, oh yeah, this was a clay pipe that was found at this was a set of measuring scales that the traders used that was found at this time. And you go down and you go into the remains of this Mithraeum, where there's a kind of a sound and light show that kind of shows you what
Oh.
it would have been like. So yeah, I mean, you can actually go down and see the layers of history in some places.
Wow, that's fascinating. So my question is, in a city like London, and as a creative writer, it kind of almost seems overwhelming. Like, how do you stay focused when you're trying to write a novel or a particular book? I'd be starting 5 projects all at one day.
This is this is actually my problem because I have a contract with my publisher to write A Pagan's Guide to Esoteric London, but I haven't finished it. I've written 3 books since I started writing that. And in fact, my novels are set in Kent. They're not, I mean, I'm right on the borders of Kent, and I went to university at Canterbury in Kent, so I kind of know Kent as well. So
Yeah.
my novels, it's like, actually, I'm going to set them somewhere smaller. My first novel, Erosion, is set on the Kent coast, and it's kind of a gothic novel set on the Kent coast. And the one I'm writing at the moment is a horror story set at Christmas, where some people go and stay in a remote cottage in Kent to have a kind of an old time Christmas, but they find the cottage is haunted and various other things going on.
Interesting. I love that. And I like to think too that I know sometimes they think haunting and they think bad witch. They always go to the negative, whereas I think, you there's really an embracing, like you said, of nature and it can be positive in your life. And I'm sure Wiccans, as you call them, and people that follow some of these traditions, they're not evil, bad people as such.
When I call myself when I wrote a Bad Witches blog, it was a bit of a joke. I wasn't meaning I was a wicked witch. I was
Yeah.
meaning I called it a Bad Witches blog because I hadn't done any witchy stuff for a few years. So I was bad in the sense that I was a bit of a lapsed witch. And I thought, well, if I write a blog, and I've been writing it for about 17 years now,
Wow.
if I write a blog, it will actually force me to go out and visit places to blog about, read books to blog about, do things. And yeah, it's been going on now for 17 years. So
Oh,
it
that's fabulous.
worked.
Yeah, it did work. And that's interesting. You used the word lapsed. I like that. Because it is probably kind of a skill, that's extra sensory kind of feeling, my mom, and I say that because oftentimes we'd walk into a building and the guide would be talking, even then in the States, and all of a sudden she'd stop the guide at the end of the trip, the tour, and she'd be like, has anyone ever felt any ghosts or seen any ghosts? And sometimes the guide would stop because, some places they don't want that history out because it turns people off. So, but yeah, my mom always had that sense, and I don't know, I feel like I don't have it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think most people can develop it. I mean, I mean, I teach workshops in various things, but including scrying. And scrying is like we're looking into a crystal ball or a bowl of water, and you can use that to kind of also to like tune into what spirits might be present, as well as to answer, to find answers to questions and so on. Um, but I think I I I teach these workshops because I I wasn't good at things like that when I was young. And as I said, I think I'm lucky because my family, it wasn't a bad thing in my family,
Right, right.
and so my dad taught me to use a dowsing pendulum. My grandma taught me to to do divination with cards, but I didn't really feel I was very good at it, and so I feel, well, I've learned, luckily, with the encouragement of my parents and my dad taught me, but I wasn't very good when I started. And I think that anybody can learn, it just needs a bit of patience. And some people, well, like with anything, I mean, some people will pick up a paintbrush and be able to paint
Yes.
brilliant pictures, but most people could learn to paint a reasonably good picture if they had enough practice and training.
Oh, I love that. Because that's my attitude about things too, is if you try, a lot of times people say, well, I can't take a good picture or this and that. And I say, you just need to develop it. Everybody sees differently. So, and that's what I love when I go out photographing or traveling with people is
Mm.
somebody's looking over here and sees that, somebody else sees the little mushroom on the ground. So I
Yeah.
love that you believe that people can work on these skills. And so was there ever an experience that you had in London that really kind of moved you, maybe, inspired one of these books where you were just something unexplained?
Oh, goodness. Mm, yeah. To be honest, I I'm quite into something called psychogeography, which is sensing the atmosphere of of places that you go,
Oh,
and it's kind of it it's basically a kind of an urban thing, and it's a little bit mystical, but not entirely. But you kind of wander around, you walk around, and you basically pick up on the atmosphere and the energy of the places. And I've often gone on like psychogeographical walks with my husband, and
wow.
often that can inspire some writing. I mean, I've actually done mostly poetry based on that. I'm not gonna like I'm not going to force anybody to do poetry, but I have done some writing based on that. But and it certainly has inspired some things. So and it's it's you could be wandering along and you might see um an ink some paint on a wall, and you think, oh, look at that paint on the wall, doesn't it look like a such and such? And you're
Right.
really letting um your imagination inspire you, but you're also trying to tune into the energy of the place. So it's a kind of a mixture of tuning into what's really there, tuning into what's there psychically, but also kind of doing a bit of storytelling as you're going along. So you might be, I mean, one of the things we did back in the Pokemon craze, we said, okay, well, we're going to do a psychogeography walk, but rather than like looking for Pokemon monsters,
Right.
we are going to look for like, oh, look, there's a hole in that roof. I bet a monster put its foot through that. And you actually, it's amazing what you spot. So you might spot, I mean, obviously in London, quite some of the old buildings have
Yes.
things like gargoyles on them. I mean,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
interesting gargoyles. And so you might say, oh, look, there's a gargoyle. That's obviously a monster. Um, yeah, so there is kind of that kind of thing. But so yes, I think that probably answers the question.
Yes, but I love that idea of kind of taking a wander, taking a walk, and maybe being more, and even for those that aren't trained yet, just being open to whatever, maybe you look at a corner, you just decide, like, you know what, we don't have to have a route. We're just gonna kind of
Yes,
wander and let our gut and kind of what happens along the way. Like, oh, we see something down the street. That looks interesting. Let's take that way. And
that's exactly. In fact, I mean, the term psychogeography actually comes out more from the French term le flaneur, which means wanderer, and that was like in 19th century Paris. These they were mostly like posh blokes, really, but they would say, "Oh, I'm a flaneur. I wander around, and I just wander wherever I want to go." And so yes, I mean, it kind of grew out of that, really.
oh, that's actually really interesting because sometimes I think we do need to free ourselves, I often say, of all these digital devices. And years ago, you'd have to, like, even if you took a drive, you might have had a paper map, but a lot of the little back roads,
Yeah.
they're not on those paper maps. And so you just kind of got to go with your gut. I mean, I remember driving in Ireland, there's no road signs for lots of that. You just kind of have to try to get where you're going and follow.
Yeah, and yes, I think there's something you said. I mean, yes, if you're trying to find somewhere on Google Maps, you're like, you've got your head down on your
Yes.
phone, and you're, oh, right, I'll go here, I'll go right here. But you're not looking at everything that's around you.
Right, right. You're not observing, you're not interacting with people. I think there's something to be said a little bit for getting lost and maybe
Yeah.
having an experience or having to walk in, especially for us that English is the language of most places. But when I travel, sometimes, I haven't learned Spanish or French or the other languages. So if I get turned around, I almost prefer to go into a business and ask and try to have them tell me which
Mm.
way. I like to be free a little bit of these phones and everything.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. So these characters, where do you come up with some of your characters in your book? Because that's probably a little more challenging since you have such
Hmm.
a wealth of locations to kind of draw from where you live.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, they are actually the characters, the first thing I come up with if I'm writing a book. or actually a role-playing game scenario, I will come up with the characters. I mean, obviously, in some role-playing games, the players will design their own character, but if I'm if I'm writing it, I will also come up with the non-player characters, so like the bad
Oh,
guys and that kind of thing. But yes, certainly my novel, the first thing I do is I've got an idea of what I want the book to be. So, like, for example, group of friends staying in a haunted cottage. The first thing I did, and that actually took me a little while, was thinking, okay, so I'll come up with some names and some relationships between them, and what do they like, what jobs do they do, what's their biggest fear, what is it they want, a physical description of them. And I sometimes you'll just, I mean, one of my characters, um, it was just sparked by absolutely ages ago. I was
oh,
at a music festival and I was just chatting to a stranger, as you do sometimes. And he was saying how he really liked to go to places where people didn't know what he did for a living. I said, well, what do you do for a living? He said, well, I'm a dentist, you see, and everyone hates the dentist.
yeah,
If I go to places where no one knows what I do, I can just make friends. So I've got this character who's a dentist
oh,
in
I
my
love
in
that.
my in my book, and he's like the group belonged to a book club, and that's how they met. And he went along to the book club because he was just going to make friends with people who like books, um, rather than people just going to because he's a
Right.
dentist.
Oh, that's great, actually. I love that. And what an unexpected answer, this gentleman. I mean, that in itself, it's probably somebody that you kind of, in the back of your mind, like, okay, I'm going to hang on to this interaction because,
Yes.
you know, it's not like, I almost expected to say he was a spy or I don't know, some like celebrity in some other country or something. But, oh, that's fabulous. So do you read a lot of other people's books or watch movies or
Yeah, yes, I do read. I'm a very keen reader. I think because I kind of write kind of spooky gothic tales, and I think probably I mean Shirley Jackson I think is a brilliant writer. And I think The Haunting of Hill House is probably my favorite ghost story. And if I could write something as good as that, I would be so happy.
that's sometimes the challenge I'm sure as a writer is like you want to attain this and it's like hopefully your words get out there and I think that's a challenge. I mean, do you feel like readers have changed a little with
Mm.
with the Kindles and they can listen to a book on the phone on their ears?
Yeah,
Do you feel that?
absolutely. You Nowadays, I mean, back then there wasn't so much other entertainment. So,
Right.
people would whereas we might say, oh, well, what movie shall I watch tonight? And you watch it on various different devices.
Yeah.
Back then it was like, well, they didn't really have that. So they'd read a book, because that's what they had. So nowadays, I think books need to be much tighter. And they need to grab the reader really in the first few lines. That if a reader picks up a book and the first few lines are a bit dull, they might just put it down and
Right.
not get any further.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's our attention spans, as you just said, are much because I look at some of the books from the past and they're like super thick, and you're like, oh my gosh, who's going to read James Michener's, Ode to Alaska or whatever it is? It's just too overwhelming. And it is, I think our attention spans have just gotten shorter. And so you're
Mm,
right, you really have to grab someone in the first page, maybe
mm,
two pages at best.
yeah.
So how many rewrites, may I ask, to some of your books? Because I think that would be the most daunting thing.
I think I'll lose count. Yeah, but I mean, um, I'm not. There are books that I have to write something that's pretty sound in the first draft, or else it. is likely to get put to one side, and it's like, oh, no. I mean, have you heard of Nano, where people try to write a first draft of a novel in a month?
Yes. Oh,
Every
yes, in
November, yeah.
November. In
Yeah,
November. It's a big
I
thing in
did
November.
that one year, and I I did complete it. I did finish it, and that book is just sitting in a drawer.
Well, that's good to know there's other people that try that challenge. I've tried it and I was like, this is just, it wasn't cohesive. I've not written a whole book for that very reason. I have bits and pieces of guidebooks and it's like nobody's going to read this if it's too dull or too. I think even guidebooks, you need to have a theme or a topic, something that really, like the guide you're working on, it needs to be something that a specific audience is going to get something out of.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree. And yeah, I mean, I think with Nano, you're writing so many words each day, and it's just like, okay, I don't care what rubbish I'm writing. And this is another Gothic ghost story, and it is actually set in London, the one, the Nano book.
Oh,
Um, but it was like I was just running out of ideas of what to write with. So I think I've got about 3 paragraphs where someone's clearing out a bedroom where an old woman has died, and it's like, I'm going to write more bedroom. I'm going to write more bedroom because I don't know what to write next. It's 3 chapters of going through the wardrobe.
oh no, yeah.
So it's really, yeah. I don't know. It. Maybe one day I'll have another look at it.
Right. But it's probably it is a good exercise for people to attempt and does get that muscle going because,
Yeah.
like your blog, I think there is some merit in, as you said, just keep working at getting the words out, putting something down. And I think that often is a challenge we have. You just stare at this blank computer screen. I don't know about you, but I find just pulling out a notebook if I'm actually going to write something and handwrite it, and then move it to my computer.
I think everybody has their own way of writing. And for some people, just sitting there and bashing out words and editing, that works. It doesn't for me. In fact, I'm far more likely to come up with ideas if I'm doing something else. So I will probably, if I will, I try to write about 500 words a day.
Oh,
And
nice.
I will, sit down, and I will, if the ideas are coming to me, I will write it. And if they're not, I'll go away and do the housework, because the number of times I've gone away, it's like, okay, right, I'm going to do the hoovering. And then suddenly it's like, I've now got an idea. And I'll
Yeah.
rush and write it down. Whereas, and I find it comes to me much quicker when I'm thinking, okay, right, I'll go do the hoovering, than if I'm just sitting there thinking, I've got to come up with an idea, I've got to come up with an idea. But other people think that what I do is completely wrong and it wouldn't work for them. But I think everybody has their own way of doing it. And I think whatever works for you, so long as so long as you write something in the end, it doesn't matter how you got there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think you should write a book a little bit more about just some of these walks in London, because like I said, the
Mhm.
city just has so much to offer. And so many authors have been inspired there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just an amazing place. And I think different seasons. I find going to London when it's cold and rainy is perfectly enjoyable for me. That was my first experience, was a going, I think it was December. So there was that
Mm.
mix of like quietness, but then the next moment there's all these people filling the streets to look at the lights, and London really embraces the holidays, the whole Christmas thing.
I absolutely adore London at Christmas time. Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, yeah, one of my favorite experiences of London at Christmas time was when I went on a ghost walk at Christmas.
Oh,
So yeah, it took in quite a few of the sort of supposedly quite famous haunted places. There's what was Mag's Mag's Booksellers, which is supposed to be one of the most haunted houses in London. And there's a haunted. Now, this is a really weird story. There's a haunted tree in Green Park.
really?
Apparently, if women fall asleep under it, they are. they might get possessed by the spirit of a of a of the pig woman and then go around and murder men. And it's like that is such a weird
Yeah, that
story.
is such a weird story. You wonder where the story started from,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I mean people have tried to trace it back and there have been um various, like there was one instance when a policeman was called because this pig woman was sighted in Green Park.
oh,
And and apparently a homeless person was murdered by the spirit of the pig woman. Um, and it's kind of weird that it's kind of a female killer because most of the
yeah,
I mean, it's
exactly.
not a
That's true.
great thing, you know. It's not great that it's a female killer, but it's kind of like it's a bit, maybe a little bit of equality there.
Right, maybe it is a yeah, exactly. Because a lot of, especially with London, we hear about all the male evil, murderers and so forth. But yeah, I think women equally. I mean, I know myself. I mean, I have my good side, my bad side, Somebody does me wrong, watch out, Not that I would go to that extreme, but, I think it's sometimes we don't always get pictured as that. But I think in most writings, the men tend to, as they have for centuries. Yeah, in some of your books, are the females the main characters or?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Every one of my novels. I mean, obviously the non-fiction books are non-fiction, so they don't really have main characters. But my novels are, yeah, they all have female main characters. In Erosion, it's a young woman in her early 20s who's recently finished university and decides she wants to spend summer by the coast rather than um, go back home to live with their parents or find a job after finishing university. And she's the main character, and she's also the main character in the book I'm writing now. But in the book that I didn't finish, it's actually a woman whose husband has just died, and died in mysterious circumstances, but murder has been ruled out. They think he died of a heart attack. Um, but she doesn't really believe it, and she's looking through his things, and it's written first person in this in she's writing a journal of her thoughts, which I thought was a nice idea,
Yes.
but it
Not,
didn't get
yeah, it
very far.
hasn't quite. Yeah, you're struggling with it. So what are some of do you work with actually other writers then too to get feedback? How important do you feel?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I do absolutely. I've got some. In fact, I've literally just before we chatted, I was reading through some feedback from one of my friends who very, very kindly read the first 7 chapters of the book I'm currently writing, and has given me some great feedback. And I don't want people to just tell me the things they like about it. I want people to tell me if I mean he's spotted a lot of cliched phrases I'd use, which is of
Oh,
course it's great that I can like, oh yeah, you're right, absolutely. I should change that for something less cliched because a fresh pair of eyes will spot that kind of thing.
right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's super important to be open to input because we do get caught in our own little, world of how we write or how we speak or, whatever it is, whether it's art or, but it's just being open to that, that feedback that can be very helpful. And it needs to be a little bit critical at times. It can
Mm.
often change the course of how
Yeah,
how the final product turns out.
yeah, I mean, I would never be offended by someone who's reading it before it goes to press. Some of the reviews you get after it's been published. I mean, there was one such sad little. I got a 1-star review on
Oh,
Amazon for one of my books, and it was like, this was my last chance to prove to myself that magic might work. I had tried so many different things before. This was my last chance, and I read this book and I tried some spells and they didn't work. So I'm only giving this book 1 star. It was quite well written, though.
you're like, what? Yeah, like the book doesn't guarantee the spell is gonna work. Oh dear.
It's really cool.
Wow. That's all, like you said, that's kind of sad, like my last chance. Oh dear. It's like, please don't give up on your Oh dear. So what are some places in London that you feel strongly that first time visitors should visit?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think to some extent it depends what interests you. I mean, I think the British Museum is always worth a visit. The Tower of London is just pretty amazing. But obviously there are also like lots, I mean, well, I mean, the British Museum is free to visit. Tower of London is quite
Oh.
expensive. Most of the museums in London, like the Natural History Museum or the Science Museum or the Victoria and Albert Museum, are free to visit. And I think they're,
Oh, that's
really,
wonderful.
really good. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd say if you, but not everyone likes museums. Um,
Right.
I think, I mean, people say how expensive London is, but there are lots of free things you can do. I mean, as I mentioned, the Mithraeum is free to visit. Do have to book a ticket in advance, but it's free to visit. Also, there are some great viewing platforms where you can go up really high and look out on London that are free. Horizon 22 I went up there actually myself just a few weeks ago,
Oh,
um,
nice.
and it's really high. You get a great view around. And again, you have to book a ticket, but it's free. The Sky Garden is it's like a garden right on top of one of the great big um, office blocks.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so it's an impressive garden, but it's also got a viewing platform. And
That
some of them have
sounds
cafes and restaurants as well there.
that sounds
Um,
stunning.
so
Yeah.
they're worth it. Uh, I mean, I'd say what I would say is there are tour buses that go around the city, but if you go on an official tour bus, then they can like a hop on hop get on hop off tour bus.
Right.
They're quite expensive, and if you want to
Yeah.
do it on the cheap, you can just catch I think the number 36 bus or the I think the number 24 bus. There are a few others or a 38 bus that will go around. I think the 38 bus is pretty good, and they're just you can just tap in with your credit card and it will cap at something like £7 total in a day, and you can just use it as much as you like, and it will go around. You'll see quite a lot of the sites, um,
That's
and
an
I mean,
excellent tip, and it is. It's you're still getting to see the city. Why? Yeah.
yeah, and getting a river one of the river buses, so going up the Thames on a river bus, go down to Greenwich on the river bus from
Oh.
somewhere like Westminster Pier, and you can go down the Thames, get off at Greenwich. Greenwich is brilliant. There's the old Royal Naval buildings that are really great to wander around. There's a great market. There's the Cutty Sark, which is a ship, like an old sailing ship that you can go around. Greenwich Park, and that is in Greenwich Park is where the observatory is where the line is for the Meridian line.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, where time begins.
Yes. Yeah, there's certain neighborhoods too, because I think too, if someone were to just get a good walking map of London, there's just knowing what neighborhoods might be fascinating to someone, maybe if they're looking for that old history and some of the older parts.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, I would say get a book of guided walks and just pick one that interests you. That the city of London, the square mile, that is obviously the very old financial area, and there's lots of history there, and also things like St Paul's Cathedral, the Guildhall. That's another thing. The Guildhall. If you go downstairs in the Guildhall, you can see part of an old Roman amphitheatre.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I mean, the city has a lot of old stuff and a lot of the old financial institution. Then over at Docklands, that is like the very quite a lot of modern, huge buildings. But of course, there's lots of huge new buildings building up in the city of London as well. So like you take a picture one year and it's like, well, the next year there's three skyscrapers
Oh,
in it, you know.
right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
And for people that fly into London, is there a particular neighborhood then that kind of puts them central to walking to many of the
Right.
areas?
Okay. Um, well, I mean, London is, if you get off at Heathrow, then the, take the Elizabeth line. That's the new underground line, the Elizabeth line, and that will take you right into central London. And on the transport map, like zone one and zone two are very central. I think what I would say is if people want a budget hotel in London, then something like a Travelodge. Now they are budget, but they're very clean, and it's like a very clean, cheap budget chain.
Yeah.
And I think there's a Travelodge near London Bridge,
Oh, nice.
and I know a friend of mine who came over from America stayed there and was very happy with that. And there are some others as well. Premier Inn is another cheap chain. So if you get one that's in zone one or zone two, you're going to be pretty central. Staying near London Bridge is quite good. You've got Borough Market, which is
Oh,
a really brilliant food market nearby. There's a lot of You can walk along the bank of the Thames, and uh, there's a lot of street performers that you can see as you walk past, and you can see quite a lot of interesting London. You can walk over London Bridge, and you'll find yourself more in you're really just the other side of the river from central London. Um, yeah, sorry, I could witter all about
no,
London
I
Bridge.
love it. I love it because I think for I just think London is such a fascinating city, and I just feel like any season it's good to go. But I
Mhm.
especially love Christmas, like you said. It gets
Yeah.
dark early, the city comes alive with lights, and all the neighborhoods are kind of different. There's like little pop-up places to get hot chocolate and
Yeah, I'm along the near London Bridge. They often have this they call it a frost fair. I mean, it's not really a frost fair. The old-fashioned frost fairs, like back in the 16th, 17th century, was where the Thames froze over. And so
oh,
in the middle of winter, they'd have these fairs on the ice.
oh
Well,
wow.
nowadays they'll have a frost fair, but it's not. It's on the banks of the Thames, and it's like a bit of a fair.
Yeah. Yeah, but just that spirit of it all. Oh,
Yeah.
Lucia, this has been incredible. So tell people again where they can find your books,
Okay.
your
Well,
what
you
the
can
best
find my
place.
books on Amazon. If you search for Lucya Starza, you'll find my Pagan Portals books and my novel. Um, so yeah, that's where you'll find my books. It's you can find them other places, but that's just as easy. Also, my publisher's website, which is Collective Ink.
Oh,
Collective Ink
interesting.
is my the overall publisher, so you can go to their website. And my blog is www.badwitch.co.uk.
I love that. And what kinds of things do you put on the blog just to tease people? Because I think it's a fun blog. I love it.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Well, there's some witchy stuff. So I might put a spell up sometimes. I also blog about London quite a lot. I blog about folklore. Quite recently, I've been blogging a lot about London's parks and green spaces
Oh,
because a lot of people assume that London is going to be just all concrete. But actually, about 50% of London is either green space or water, which is like really quite huge. And in fact, London was, uh, oh goodness, it's the first national park city because it
oh.
has so many green spaces. And they're really trying to increase that as well. So I've been blogging a lot about London's parks, and yeah, London has some great parks.
No, I love that. And I do because I recently traveled this summer and I just felt, as you said, as a traveler, we were going to all these cities and I just was like citied out. I'm like, at the end, I'm like, I literally spotted a tree and I had to go sit by the tree, hug the tree. I'm like, give me some nature, after so much concrete. So it's
Yeah,
wonderful, like you said, with the Thames River, these green spots, that you can have that mix and feed your soul with nature and city. So I think that's super important. Well, check out the blogging again. Tell us the blog one more time since I rattled
okay.
on.
It's a Bad Witches blog at www.badwitch, all one word, .co.uk.
Thank you so much.